And I wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you because there aren't that many musicians that I've been able to speak with. And then you have this whole other interesting side to what you do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I did notice that. And, that's a form of art and collaboration and community and all of that. So thanks for the chance to talk about it.
No, absolutely. And so we can jump right in if you wanted to share a little bit about sound union and what you were trying to achieve through that.
Well, as you said, uh, musicians kind of lack a space for community. At least I'm in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, and um, I've always used music as a release, from the high pressure workspace, et cetera. It was an easy way to recharge batteries. But learned over the 30 years or so of doing it that it takes a long time to build up a community of people who are sort of like-minded or like to play the same things and that you could play with. Um, so about 6 or 7 years ago, got to thinking there's got to be a better way to connect with others without the anxiety, without the auditioning and things like that. So that's and looking around, there are places for people to communicate or to connect around sports, around other activities like painting um, and I thought, well, let's try to create that for musicians and create a space that's safe and open because it's a pretty vulnerable art. I mean, you are out there when you're playing. Um, so how do we create a cool space that makes it easier to do that?
It's interesting because I find that the two categories that have been hardest for me to attract of people as guests to talk with me is people in the performing arts. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting because you make yourself vulnerable out on stage all the time. But in the conversations, it seems to be a bit more difficult for me to attract them.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting. I'm not sure why that would be, other than just people are. It is a like you said to come and talk about what you do or why or how, and open up to the motivations. In some respects, it's kind of a really selfish pursuit. I mean, it's fun. It really is fun to play music and perform. And that is a key driver for a lot of folks. Maybe that's part of that the feeding that ego that nobody wants to admit to. But so my background in college was around neuroscience, and even though I didn't use it in my profession per se, always been interested in the positive effects of complex pursuits like music or art, and how kind of hopefully it keeps your brain active, keeps you from keeps your neuroplasticity alive and always learning. And then there's the interpersonal aspect that is really addictive, right? You find somebody you connect with, and many musicians end up playing with those people their whole lives, right? And that's actually one of the dynamics that I found interesting to try to break because you get comfortable playing with others, but then somebody moves away, and now you're looking around and okay, where's my network? Well, my network were those five people that I spent 10 years playing with, right? So try to provide a way to make that a little bit easier for people to connect and enjoy music with others. So we've created this space where that happens.
What would be the ways that you would reach out to people to let them know about the space and that it's a safe space, an open space for people of all abilities, or is it still kind of like high performing
Now we
musicians?
really embrace. I try to create a cultural DNA with the team here that whether you step up to the mic for the first time or the millionth time, or you pick up a guitar or sit behind a drum set, whatever, for the first or millionth, you are a musician. This is something you want to do. Um, it has manifested in really wonderful ways too. The one of our first showcases where we featured members we have a small stage for people to perform on. And one of our first showcases was for a holiday. And on the stage was Grammy nominated producer playing drums who just comes here to have fun because he works his butt off and then now he can come and play and have fun. We had a guitar player who was a jazz master. He was a psychiatrist, but really played amazing jazz for 50 years. And then we had three singers who had never performed in public before, and nobody on stage was like, "Oh, I don't do that," or I only play with pros. So we have folks of all levels, and we try to foster this environment. There's always somebody who can lift you up, and there's always somebody you can lift up, so that we have sort of an accepting. You have to do that to because it is vulnerable, and to lower the barriers of anxiety to try and do things. Um, and that's kind of some of the magic that has happened here that keeps me going actually.
What would be some of the things you might have started off doing to help create that kind of DNA? Because from the beginning, I can imagine there's encouragement you have to do to let people know this is a space where you can just be yourself and play and enjoy playing without expectation of how good you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a deliberate intent, right? And then, to be honest, thinking about how it manifests, um, is a good question because you don't always. I mean, you can certainly say, come in, and by attitude, we have session leaders, and our staff is really driven by the tenet that it says, look, if you're a rock star at work, you're going to be a rock star when you're here. We treat people, like they're pursuing their music wishes and fantasies. That I think I brought from my professional experience in advertising and marketing. Very competitive field. I'm admittedly a pretty competitive person. And you can't really survive in that industry without having a little bit of an ego. But I had a mentor. I had,
At least you can
um,
say that out loud, John.
well,
Just you to own it. You own it.
well, yeah, there are many of us who do own it, and it's kind of the badge. But I did have a really, you know, people come into your life, and every once in a while, there's something they say, and it gets stuck in your long term memory. And I can't tell you why or how that happens, at least in my experiences. But I had this wonderful mentor who all he did was in one short conversation. We were, mentored for a year or so, but in one short conversation, as I was an executive creative director at the time in charge of about 20 people, and he said, "Look, man, your job is not to win the awards anymore. Your job is to create an environment where your team can do the best work of their lives." And he said it that way. He didn't say win awards because, we like awards, but he said create an environment where they can create or do the best work of their lives. And if you can't, then you got to help them find a place that they can do that in. That just went into my professional DNA when he said that. I don't know why, but it just clicked. And when my business partner and I, who both have been in the ad industry, we've worked together for 19 years now, almost 20 years. When we were talking about the environment we want to create here, that was central, right? How do you create an environment where somebody can walk in and go, "Wow, it's not the only place I play music. We certainly want to be the favorite place. That's part of it. But if we create a feeling or create an environment with, equipment and people and culture and amenities where people feel like, man, that's the best work I'm doing." I think that not only is a wonderful thing, but it's a pretty sticky thing, right? You can do that a few times and have a pretty high brand affinity, and and it bleeds, and others see that, and others want to do that, and you also want to give back. Music is a pretty if in the right circumstances, I think it's a pretty genuine art. Um, and you can see we have sessions where I have a 25-year-old tech who is a phenomenal guitar player, plays wonderful jazz, blues, whatever. And I've seen him lift up 50, 60, 70-year olds, 40-year olds who are, how does that chord shape go? And, you know, and then they in turn share that with others too when he's not around, right? So um I think talking about it sort of in that instance manifests it, right? And having that promoting that and praising that is a big part of our culture as well.
I think it's probably almost like an occupational hazard of mine, but sometimes because I find it's a theme that's common across. Like I've spoken to a couple of massage therapists, an arts therapist, anybody who's creating space, actual physical or virtual space for people to come together and share things about themselves that they may feel shy about sharing. And then I come from a background of corporate training, so the classroom, whether it's a live or virtual classroom, that's the kind of work I do more of. And it's the same thing of a facilitator sort of trying to create the space. And I always ask the questions to get somebody to explain to me in words what they're doing. But I don't think it's a word language. It's not a verbal language thing. It's a feeling and an attitude and a way of you guys probably all being in that space that creates that environment.
I think it's a bit of a personality thing too, a trait, right? One of the one of the other things I learned in a recent job before I started this was, and I think we were all kind of aware of this, but in a seminar, you know, we had a lecturer about inward and outward people, right? So if you're outwardly focused, service oriented, this was a financial services tech firm, and they were talking about being, you know, outwardly focused because your clients, you want to take care of your clients, and the best financial advisors are naturally outwardly focused, not inward. What's in it for me? Blah blah blah. And I have definitely, in creating the team and building the team, been looking for people who exhibit those outward personality traits, right? Because we are a service oriented business. There's a wonderful restaurateur in New York, Danny Meyer, who, among other things, has started a long time ago Gramercy Tavern. He started Shake Shack as well. But his theme around the restaurant experience. Here's another one who, when I heard him say this in a video and read about it, because he has a wonderful book as well. Like you to have to be able to create an experience that is someone's favorite experience is pretty hard to dislodge. He even said, I don't want to be the best restaurant in New York. I want to be someone's favorite restaurant, because best comes and goes, and it's objective, right? Or subjective. And I thought, okay, that's a pretty cool thing. How does he do that? He talks about hiring people with a high hospitality quotient. We know what an EQ is, the emotional quotient. Um, so I started studying how he does that and what traits he looks for. And it's the same philosophy. Those outwardly focused people are who are there to create a service experience that elevates um, the the experience they have dining. And we're trying to do that here with the experience people have around music and their pursuit of music. So I think the short answer is you look for people who sort of exhibit some of those natural tendencies, and then create an environment that can foster that. We talk about it all the time amongst the team. We do, you know, weekly recaps on what works, what doesn't, because we're inventing a new model here. But we do spend time on, you know, it's not just about the quality of play that someone experiences here. It's about the quality of the community, the quality of the instruments, all the other stuff, and people looking at you right in the eyes when they greet you, smiling, making sure you're taken care of. And musicians, at least in my experience, even as an accomplished musician on the side, we don't get that. You know, we're in dingy garages, we're, you know, warehouse space, and you might have a great day job, but unless you have a, you know, a member in the band who's pretty well heeled and has their own, you know, music studio, you play where you can, right? So that experience of celebrating the pursuit of music, which I think is a noble, not only personal pursuit. I think it's one of those music is one of those activities, and in a lot of ways, like art and experiential art, that really gives back to the people who experience it. Um, I joke that you might be a really good pickup basketball player or be on a great baseball team, in the spring. Um, but people may not pay to go watch you play. People pay to get, to watch amateurs play music all the time. And so I wanted to try and acknowledge that and celebrate that as well.
So, I mean, definitely a lot of it probably has to do with you and your team really believing passionately in the benefits of music for the people playing and for the people who are experiencing it, listening to it. Can you talk a little bit about what you see that strength of, because I have a quote from you that says, music is a keystone of life. And I loved that because it speaks to just how fundamental it is to us as a language that's separate from visual language or verbal language. Um, and I'm not going to remember this at all now, but somewhere a long time ago, I listened to a podcast where they talked about how music predated verbal language. So sound making, um,
I,
just like mark making and sound making predated, our verbal language. So it's fundamental.
yeah, and I do I absolutely correct. I think that you can see that it would predate formal shapes and forms of letters and sounds and those strung together. It is really in a lot of ways primal. I mean, we still there's some magic about sitting around a campfire and singing and playing guitar and listening. I mean, music is not just about performing where the benefits are created. Um, but I think it is a form of communication that is pretty fundamental, right, to us. And I think that's also why there's so many shapes and forms of it that people grok onto. Um, so I think yeah, I think that's part of the longevity and the impact that it has in our cultural spaces, because it is so sort of natural to us as a form of expression and a form of communication.
I know, just from looking around a bit, that there's evidence of the cognitive benefits of
Oh yeah.
music. So it stimulates you mentally, intellectually. And also, just within the last 24 hours, I have somehow fallen down the hole of music therapy, which I didn't know was a thing. Um, but therapists using music as opposed to talk therapy or other forms of art therapy, using music as a way to help address trauma,
Oh yeah.
reduce anxiety, all those other things. Does your in your community, do people talk about music in those kinds of ways about the benefits?
Um, the short answer is yes. And I'll give you an example. My business partner and I have a longtime friend who is the chair of an organization. You talk about the cathartic, the restorative, the health benefits of music. I think there's no better example than I'll give them a little plug. There's a group out of Nashville called Songwriting with Soldiers, and this is a group that has gathered a stable of the best songwriters in Nashville, trained them to work with veterans who have PTSD. And there's a 3-day journey that they take, and they write music and do other things as part of the restorative process. They've been doing it a little over 11 years now. They have over 2,500 songs that have been written, and they
Wow.
are some of the most amazing songs you will ever hear. And then when you hear the stories of the veterans behind the songs, and they collaborate with these songwriters, um, it's complete evidence that, oh my God, this music literally saves some lives in those cases. And I've talked to at least one of the vets who's come through the program, and he's like, "Yeah, man. I mean, it saved my life being able to express in music um, the experience that I had." So I think that's like the most intense example. But there are examples every day where can relieve stress. I have some of my members are busy execs and they have 200 people at work they're responsible for. They've got a family of, 5, 6 people at home they're responsible for. And they'll come here, go into a room with their instrument, close the door, draw the curtains, and come out 2 hours later and, tell me, wow, that is, that's my therapy. That's what I needed to kind of just shake off some of the pressure and get back out there. So I think it can be little things like that and really serious and have massive impact as well. That I'll say too, as a driver for what I do and sort of my own transformation, I spent a career, selling widgets, tech and prosumer
I
tech. And
teach people how to use widgets, so I can relate.
there you go. Yeah, and it's fun and all of that. But um, it got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm doing that and I'm okay at that, and jobs come and go. And when in discussion with my business partner, we kind of landed on what are our passions around and what drives us, and formulated this idea for the business. Um, the feeling of accomplishment that I have in just creating this space and seeing other people use it and the impact that it has, it's a lot better than knowing that I sold, a few million units of X or Y, right? Or help
Yeah.
sell. Yeah.
It does sound, though, that you were able to bring a lot of your experience and skills from that part of your life, that business, into the business that you have now. So it served you well to bring you to the point where you had what you needed to be able to run a business like that.
Yeah, definitely some advantages there, right? Spending 30 years. I started really working on this business in my mid 50s. And um, I had a startup in my early 30s that went with the bubble and first .com rise, and learned a lot from that experience because it was ultimately the business didn't last, but I won't call it a failure because we learned quite a bit about business and how to and ourselves, et cetera. Um, but I do, and I'll dial back the ego part of this, but I do think there's some valid point that this business wouldn't have been created, couldn't thrive without the perspective that my partner Tom and I share, and in being in a service business for our careers, in understanding how to foster creativity in an ad agency, in understanding how to and learning how to not dictate to people, but direct people, right? If you're a creative dictator, not a creative director, people don't like working with you, and your idea is not always the best anyway. So if you're open to other people and their ideas, I've learned to say, I shouldn't say always, I've learned to say there's 100 ways to solve the problem. It doesn't have to be my way, right? So I think having that perspective, I also humbly would say that as a bass player and a backing vocalist, not a front person, I bring a perspective. As a bass player, you're back there to form the foundation with the drummer and the rhythm section, right, and the keys, so that the song really has that strong foundation. And people mostly focus on the lead singer or the front person, right? I think I would have a different approach to this business if I had my music experience was around being a front man, or and I don't think it would be the same thing. I don't think it would be as compelling um, for people to come in and feel like the business isn't here to support them, right? So I think combining that all those years of experience in the marketing world and trying to create an environment for others to succeed in that realm definitely is a huge part of an approach to art, an approach to music that we try to manifest here.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting for you to see that parallel in terms of your role as a background foundational person who's supporting the front, the lead people. Um, there was a question that was right on the tip. It's just
It's
flown
okay.
away. But it was related to what you were just saying. But how about for the moment, I just ask you, what? Oh, I know what it was. How did you manage to balance what I imagine was a pretty, you said you were very competitive. I'm sure you spent hours and hours at work in your business life. How did you balance that with time to devote to playing music, which is, I have dabbled. I can never get consistent enough where I'm playing regularly enough that I can actually do anything. So I pluck, I go to bed, I put it down, I pluck it. I have never been able to be, and in my drawing too, like I just can't seem to carve out that time and creative energy
Yeah.
with what I invested or I have up to this point, because I think 25 years, 25 to 30 years is a tipping point for being ready to move into another direction. I
Yeah.
have never been able to balance those things.
Well, that's a very, you have three aspects to that question.
Sorry, that was the question you're not
I
supposed to
like it.
ask. It was a multi-pronged question.
Oh no, I like it, and I'll try to break it down because I think it's an important one, especially on the path to how we were impacting our lives. You've done some great podcasts on what's the thread, or work life balance and habits. Excuse me. And part of it was the realization that I did, and again, matched well with my business partner. We worked a lot. We didn't. There's especially in a creative business, you can't really just turn it off. It's not, you don't punch out at 5 and stop thinking about the problems that you have to solve. So we had that sort of career behavior, um, not without its impacts, not without its impact at home and things like that. But there was the realization, yeah, no matter what job I have, it's it's kind of, I hope it's not workaholic, but I think it is that, I'm always, you think about stuff and how to solve it. So there's that aspect of it. Um, and so then how do you carve out time for music? Um, well, it was integrate, most of my music play was integrated with some activity through my kids' school or something like that. So there were parents, you once your kids start going to school, a lot of us mom and dad's bands players start out. Although I did get into some pretty good bands that would perform at corporate gigs and weddings and things like that. But it started with the parents. You're together for 8 years in grammar school, or 9 years from kindergarten to eighth grade, and there's always school activities that needs a band, so that you kind of get pulled into it that way, and then you start having fun, and there are bars to play at. So it really starts to absorb some of that extra energy and free time. Then you realize it's recharging for the rest of your life, right? To have that time. It we I also like to say that self-care is not selfish. So music is part of that catharsis and self-care. Um, so it becomes a thing you make time for out of the hours that you have. Again, I'll admit, I mean, it doesn't come without um, time that's not spent elsewhere. If I hadn't been in music, um, yeah, I probably would have had more time at home. I'm luckily 35 years married, and uh, uh, my wife is patient and tolerant to certain degrees, as we all are after this much, this long of a marriage, I'll admit. Um, but yeah, you kind of, it becomes a priority. Your priorities adapt. Um, so that's how you find the time. It's a long-winded answer. The other short thing I would say to you, you talk about trying to find time, is another thing I remember from junior high school. My band teacher, Marty Baum, uh, said, all I want you guys to do is practice 10 minutes a day. And I remember feeling some relief about that. But I learned, you know, within few years as an adult when I was reflecting on how did I learn to play music, that 10 minutes became enjoyable. So it became 15 and became 20, became 30, and would become an hour because you enjoy the practice, right? And so that might be a way to, take the pressure off having to devote an hour to exercising your art muscles and just do it for 10 minutes. And I think Marty will have taught us all a lesson that yeah, that 10 will turn to more time as you get more into it.
I think, and I sometimes I speak from my experience, and I think that other people have the same experience. So it's not necessarily the case, but I think there's something to it about also because I'll spend the time watching TV, right? It's not that I don't have the time, but sometimes I end up, it's more passive, or I'll read, right? Because there's certain things I can do where the barrier to entry for me is very low. I could watch TV, I could watch a movie, I don't cook because I'm really not a good cook. The barrier to entry is high for me. So the energy and the thought it takes to engage in that is challenging for me. So every time I look at my guitar hanging on the wall, I think, okay, but you know what? Ugh, my fingers, I don't have the things callous anymore. And then am I going to remember how to do this? And then I'm going to get upset with myself because I'm starting off from scratch again. And then the barrier to entry for me just seems sort of insurmountable. And I go click, click, and I watch an episode of Top Chef or something, which is, it's fun, but it's not taking me anywhere.
I totally identify, and I think there are, many in our world today who would say the same thing and identify with that. I do take it as a challenge. I because it is easy, especially after long days. You're tired. Do I want to engage my cognitive stuff? So there is allowing the time and understanding when, I like the muse hits, right? No matter what, if your muse is your creative muscles are in the morning or in the evening, you're not, it's going to be hard to get those fired up in opposite that. So a little bit of sensitivity or a little bit of awareness of when do I like to read or when do I like to do X, Y, and Z, helps a little bit. The other struggle, I mean, I'm by no means like overcome any of this stuff, is hearing that I'm giving myself permission not to versus, all right, where am I kind of encouraging myself to, right? And overcoming that. It's so easy. We have so many distractions on our phones and TV that are, um, I mean, certainly I struggle with it as well because it's all right, just 10 or 15 minutes and I'm just going to turn off for a little while. And then that turns into 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I don't know, I don't have any secret pills on how to combat that other than will. And maybe that's not the best one. I'm open to hearing, what are the other tools we can put in our time and emotional budget to overcome some of those distractions.
Um, One of the things that I have only just started approaching, and I'm nowhere done with this yet, but something about confirmation bias today, because sometimes I feel like one thing comes up and then 50 times it comes up all around me, and maybe I'm just inventing that. But I was thinking the other day about like what are my values?
Mm,
And not doing that personal branding thing because I've seen that, like but more just like my heartfelt values and just write a bunch of them down and then look at them and say, but really prioritize like what are a couple that really do feel not just that I feel like I should be doing that, but I really, really do. I'm attuned to those values. And then look quite carefully at how I spend my time and say, am I aligned with those values? And either I have to give them up and consciously say, actually, you may think that's something you want, but you're not doing the things. So shelve that, focus your energy on the things you're doing that feel that you can commit to, that will then embody these values in your life. So So I failed on the discipline part. Telling myself to do it's not working, but I'm trying to come at it from a gentle way and just say, what do you really care about? And then what activities in your day will help you be that person? And so then the interview I saw this morning just randomly was somebody saying, I looked at myself of where I was and I looked at who I wanted to be. And if you're really honest with yourself about what those are, he goes, I'm just trying to bring that guy a little closer. So a little closer to who I want to be instead of just who I am today and
Mm,
just keep growing and keep developing and keep challenging. Um, but in a way that's kind of I'm hopeful is just kind of like gentle because you just this is what I'm really aligned to. This is something I want to grow into. How can I get there?
mm. Uh, is this now a therapy session?
Yeah,
Are
I
you
know. I feel like I've gone off. Okay, let's go
that
back to
is deep
music,
and heavy.
Sean.
No, I like it. I like it because again, it is how does I mean that's a it's a question that you have to be prepared for the answer, right? And um I'm not even sure how it pertains to what I do here to, in terms of, talking about sound union and things like that. But um it does, yeah, I mean, I will say that in a startup phase, I have shelved some parts of that push of who I want to be, or say, okay, well, I can kind of put that pursuit of that aspect on hold a little bit. And I think for many entrepreneurs, certainly ones that I've talked to and know, that challenge, and I'm living it, is all right, well, I'm giving more to the business than I am to my family right now. And how long can I sustain that without, you know, giving up too much? And I think I think creative people face that all the time because you're, whatever the creative pursuit is, starting a business, painting, composing, you're, for those aspects, it's kind of there is a selfish aspect to it, right? Because it becomes a little bit engrossing to make sure something has a good foundation to start, can then go off and thrive. So that by fact of time and space and energy, you're giving up other things. So it's a pretty deep question you have of, or at least.
I'm reining it. I've got to rein it back now. I'm
Oh
gonna
no,
leave the therapy space.
I know, but in a conversation of how to pursue art and how to pursue, I mean, I think entrepreneurism is art in a lot of ways. People are creating. Sometimes, people are really creating something new. There, you have to acknowledge there is a little bit of sacrifice. Hopefully, you meter it and it's not too big.
But to try to pull the thread back through the fact that you've started a community for musicians, you've made a space that does lower that barrier because as soon as you start making connections with people and have relationships, then it becomes mutually, like you said, like the 25-year-old brings up the 56-year-old maybe one time, and the 72-year-old might bring up the 14-year-old or whatever that looks like. You're putting yourself in a space where it's not just your effort alone. You're engaging with other people who have similar kind of perspective on or interest in something.
Sure, sure.
So,
That shared aspect, yeah.
yeah,
That community, the value there. Um,
absolutely.
I've admitted this to most of my investors. uh, Only and not all. Oh, I have, now that I think about it, all of them. When I wrote the business plan, it was about the place and the space and the equipment and the opportunity. And here we're going to create something that people will come in. I I knew there would be a community aspect. I built online communities before. This is a real community, or a physical community, but I way underestimated, grossly underestimated the value that you just talked about. When people come in and they connect through music, um, there is there's a connection there that, I don't. There are a few other places in our lives where you can connect with people that deeply, that quickly. I've seen strangers come into a session, play music for 2 or 3 hours, and they are hugging goodbye, saying, when can we do this again? And when I saw that start to happen in my kind of market research, I was running studio sessions and things like that. Um, it's pretty powerful. And yeah, I mean, community is a huge thing. Neo-tribalism is a big thing that has been growing for the last, I think, as the world gets more and more access to information, any kind you want, we're actually shrinking in a lot of ways, and finding using that access to find the people who think and act and um, the way we do. Uh, I think in some cases that's not helpful to the world at large. I like to think that around music it is pretty helpful, as people find a common ground and a common experience that they can share, irregardless of their backgrounds, in a music studio. So that aspect of community, I think, is one of the key positive things that we're sending out in the world here.
I feel that way for music in particular because in different forms of artistic practice, or if it's drawing,
Mm.
it still seems more individual. You're not really collaborating together. Starting or playing music with somebody else means that, if, in my uninformed, like really outside perspective, you're communicating in a language that's not words, verbal language. And so anytime you use a different form of language or of representation, you express different meanings. It's just
Mm.
not the same. So you can say express things in music that you can't say in the words of your language that you may speak. So it just feels like that kind of connection and community for musicians and for people listening. So the spectators and the people playing, you're accessing meaning in a whole different way. We can't verbalize, but we feel it.
I mean, maybe we're now talking about anthropology, and I'm not an but
There's
the
no holds
aspect.
barred here. It's all over the place.
Go back to that. Like we there's seems to be evidence that, and it seems logical. Yeah, it would be the first language, right? But we are in a world that is so visual, so verbal, and textural, that maybe in those sessions we are lighting up that level of communication that has been dormant, unless you exercise playing music or singing or dance. I think is another way, I'm sure, right? That communication through body, and there is so much nonverbal, the eyes, the looks, the head bobs, the how your body um reacts to the music. Yeah, maybe there's something there that gets deeper into that primeval, um or is primeval the right word? Maybe just ancient way of communicating that we tie back into, that we don't really get another chance to as often in our lives. Hmm.
That would be I imagine that would be extremely satisfying. Or as a listener, I can say, I find it extremely satisfying. And I was reading this morning about different forms of music therapy and how even just exploring how different kinds of music make you feel. So even just listening to it, what are the different kinds of music that are most likely for me to reduce
Hmm.
anxiety or calm me down or address issues or whatever it is. It's going to be different music for different people. But even just that exploration sounds really interesting to me, of tapping into that other language for accessing how you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there is um, decades again of research, right? Books have been written about, okay, if I want to feel up, what kind of music and tempo can I listen to? And you can, I do subscribe to and believe that music can be used that way. I think you see it. I mean, walking through the mall and listening to the music in the mall, there's a certain attitude there. It's sort of like when piping the smells into the mall to make you hungry, right? Or the smell of a new car. Uh, so I do think that's fascinating as well. At some point, and it's not a huge part of the direction on it, but I would like to collaborate with some music therapists and see how access to musicians might change their practice or enhance their practice versus. But I don't know enough about the practice itself from a formal standpoint. But I do think that's fascinating.
Well, um, I'm gonna try to land the plane now that I've gone off, and my neighbor says I'm a squirrel. I'm just like trying to. There's a nut. There's a nut. There's a nut.
I talk too long, so
No, I'm just gonna calm myself down and try to focus. Um, just almost like a practical question, but what attracted you to the bass? Just you talked about being a supporting player, but why specifically the bass?
a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that when I was young, I mean, I would say fourth or fifth grade. So I was, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, 10, 11. My older brothers who were naturally taught great natural musicians. Most of the people in my family are in my generation are musicians. One of them played bass, and I think they needed a bass player uh, for a family band, and he figured I could handle four strings, not six. And I just I don't know. There was something that it was fun. I think the also having come from an older brother who said, "Hey, pick this up." There's that. There's a little bit of that. Oh, I'm gonna make him happy. But I really did enjoy it from the beginning, and then just it was an easy access and easy thing to get into the junior high school jazz band or the high school jazz bands, and it kind of progressed from there. And um, I think for whatever reason, it just was that thing that um, resonated with my heart. Not really overthinking it. I tell a joke that a bass player only needs four lessons, one for each string, and then you can gig. You can start. So
I did. I had a roommate once decades ago, and he taught me the bass to like how to play one Steely Dan song, and I
ooh,
would play it
that's
over
a
and
hard place
over.
to start. Do you remember which
No,
it was?
I honestly, I was. It would have to have been the simplest. I'll try to remember and I'll let you know. But it was. I would be alone in his room, like the door would be closed, and I just felt so cool. It's just great. Like,
I like it down, right?
it's
I
a
mean,
lot
you've
of
got it.
fun.
It is the foundation of a lot of songs. But boy, you starting with Steely Dan is very admirable. I love their stuff, and they are not simple. It's not like three chord rock
I
necessarily.
suspect he taught me the baby version, and you can have like the really bobo version of a song and then it progresses from there. I think he probably taught me the baby version. And but I just remember, but that's when you're, as before I started working, but I just had it was so exciting. It was exhilarating to be creating this, right? And you've got the song playing and you're trying to keep up with it. And it was just, yeah, it was so much fun.
There's something too as well. That instrument, there's one in the band. There's one kit drummer. There could be multiple horns. There could be multiple singers. You can have multiple guitars. And uh, I don't know why more people don't gravitate towards it. I mean, there are a lot of guitar players that then play the bass out of necessity. But, honestly, as a bass player, I'll tell you, they're not real bass. We have a fun joke amongst all my friends who do that. It's like real bass players only play the bass, right? But it is, and then it becomes fun. It becomes part of your music identity early on. When you're even in junior high or high school, and it's like, oh, that's the bass player in the band. There's a little bit of that. All right, now I kind of have my lane because we're all trying to find lanes in adolescence, um, and then you get sort of positive reinforcement on that. It just is a self-fulfilling, it's self-feeding loop, and then you find yourself as an adult enjoying playing Steely Dan instead of just love that stuff. And I grew up listening to bass players like Lee Sklar, who played with, I mean, gosh, everybody in Laurel Canyon. He's an amazing session player, still alive. Another bass player from Oakland with a band called Tower of Power, Rocco Prestia, who just had a way of playing that I just dug. Like you said, oh, that was exciting. to hear that line and then go learn it.
Yeah.
Uh, so I had kind of keyed into people that I could figure out what they were doing and had some fun doing that.
The drums is the other one that's kind of like the fundamental one, but it seems more complicated because there's a lot of moving around and stuff.
It
The bass
absolutely
is
is.
four strings, like you said.
I'll tell you another funny story. In high school, I was a percussionist, so I only had to move my hands and, march with my feet. And I mean, I can keep a rhythm with my hands, but we have really nice drum sets here, and my feet just they don't know what to do. They have, no matter how hard I think, I'm way past breaking it down, and I'll just use my hands.